Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Sarah Wong. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. Police have arrested 4 men who jumped bail while awaiting trial on protest-related charges. New COVID cases in Hong Kong jumped to a 3-month high. And protests turned violent in Sri Lanka as President Gotabaya Rajapaksa flees the country. 4 men, including one who was shot in the chest during the social unrest, have been arrested 2 years after jumping bail while awaiting trial on protest-related cases. A search is underway for 10 people who are said to have provided them with temporary shelter as they plan to flee the city. Isaac Lee reports.
Chen Chi-kin, Feng Chen-hua, and a 16-year-old boy were handcuffed and chained when they were taken to the district court this afternoon. They did not apply for bail and were remanded in custody until September. A 4th person was remanded until August. The 4 were arrested early yesterday at Pak Tam Chung for jumping bail in protest-related cases. Sources say they were planning to leave Hong Kong by speedboat after paying the owners of a social media channel $400,000. Before that, they were confined to at least 3 small spaces for about a year. One was a factory building unit in Tsuen Wan. National security officers also arrested a 34-year-old warehouse manager who allegedly assisted a syndicate which organized the temporary shelters. Police are trying to identify at least 10 members of the ring, but believe that most of them have already fled to other countries.
Still active because they have approached the 4 arrested persons in the last few months. Any person have come across a similar situation or someone else has mentioned about this to them, please come forward to the police.
Zhang was 18 years old when he was shot in the chest in Tsuen Wan during the social unrest in 2019. He and the other 3 were wanted by the courts for 2 years after skipping trial on charges of rioting and illegal assembly. They had tried to seek asylum at the U.S. consulate on Garden Road 2 years ago, but were dismissed. Isaac Lee, HKIBC.
Daily COVID infections in Hong Kong have continued to climb, with over 3,600 cases today, the highest since early April. Health officials, meanwhile, announced stricter COVID controls at Shenzhen Bayport. Joanna Ho reports.
The Center for Health Protection said tighter controls will be in place starting today for mainland-bound travelers who test positive through a PCR test at Shenzhen Bayport. This comes after some people were seen walking freely at the checkpoint despite wearing a red bracelet, which indicates a positive COVID result. Some who failed to obtain a negative result at the border were asked to leave on their own. Communicable Disease Branch Head Chuang Shuk-kwan said isolation orders will be issued to such people and immediate action will be taken.
To strengthen the management of these cases will require all departing passengers to be sent to the community isolation facilities.
On a separate note, health officials reminded infected people isolating at home to wear a tracking wristband from tomorrow. The hospital authority, meanwhile, reported 12 infections from a palliative care ward at the Hong Kong Buddhist Hospital. 7 patients and 5 staff members contracted the virus, and one of them died early this morning. Hong Kong added 3,674 COVID infections today, the highest since April 3rd. They include 257 imported cases. There were 62 more suspected BA.2.12.1 Omicron variant cases and another 32 suspected BA.4 or BA.5 strain. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
Legislative Councillor Kingsley Wong tested positive for COVID this morning and is isolating at home. The Election Committee lawmaker, who has mild symptoms, said in a social media post that he received 4 COVID jabs and tested negative over the past week. Yesterday, he attended the first anti-chamber exchange session initiated by Chief Executive John Lee. Wong was next to LegCo President Andrew Leung and fellow lawmaker Peter Kun when photos were taken. but they were negative today. Also testing negative was lawmaker Maggie Chen, who sat next to Wong during the meeting, but she was listed as a close contact. Meanwhile, Health Director Ronald Lam is in quarantine after being listed as a close contact of his deputy Teresa Lee, who contracted the virus. Lam self-tested negative today. 3 residential sites that will be put up for tender in the second quarter are expected to provide about 2,600 flats. This comes as the government reached 40% of its annual target for private housing. Macy Mock reports.
The Development Bureau says 3 residential sites will be sold by tender between July and September. They can provide up to 2,600 units in total, the highest number in a single quarter in over 3 years. Castle Peak Road in Tuen Mun is expected to provide the most number of flats at about 2,020. The plot of land had previously been put up for tender, but the government rejected all offers. The 2 other sites are on Hin Mo Lane in Sha Tin, which can provide about 170 homes, and Kwai Chung's Lai Kong Street, which will yield 410 units. Meanwhile, the Urban Renewal Authority will put a development project in To Kwa Wan up for tender. That site will dish out another 560 flats, bringing the second quarter private sector supply total to 3,210. Adding that to the first quarter makes a total of 5,350 units, which is 40% of the government's annual target for private housing. The administration said it will continue to increase land supply. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who has indicated that he will resign as Sri Lankan president, has arrived in Singapore from the Maldives, his first port of call after he fled his country. Back in cash-strapped Sri Lanka, at least 1 person was killed and dozens more were injured as security forces cracked down on anti-government protesters in the capital, Colombo. The victim was a 26-year-old man who died from breathing difficulties when police fired tear gas to disperse the crowd. Protesters stormed the office of acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe and demanded that he step down immediately. Tanks rode into the streets of Colombo as Wickremesinghe ordered the military to quell the riots. A searing heat wave is scorching Europe, triggering wildfires in several countries. The unusually warm weather prompted scientists to warn yet again about the growing threats posed by climate change. Wildfires engulfed the small Portuguese village of Bemposta as the blistering heat wave scorches parts of Europe. The Iberian Peninsula bore the brunt, with Portugal placed under a state of alert. Firefighters labored day and night to fight the blazes, which injured dozens of people and forced hundreds to evacuate. Some, however, insisted on staying behind to guard their homes from the moving flames. While the authorities pledged to step up their disaster response, scientists blame the abnormally hot temperatures on climate change.
This is the way we should face the next years or the next century, because the climate change projections are revealing even darker scenario from the last decades on this our century that we are living.
Heat waves will become more and more frequent, and we do need to prepare not only in terms of the way we do policies, but also the way we teach people how to deal with this kind of events.
Wildfires also broke out in Spain, southern France, and in Turkey across the Mediterranean. Britain, meanwhile, is ramping up water supplies to cope with soaring demand amid extreme heat warnings. The sweltering heat added more stress to an already difficult summer for Europeans, grappling with skyrocketing energy costs fueled by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. At least 3 people have died as the heat wave persisted in parts of the mainland. Dozens more remain in hospital because of the sizzling temperatures. When Wong reports.
For the 9th day in a row, China's Meteorological Administration issued an orange alert, or even red, for various areas. Temperatures in places like Shanghai, Hubei, and Chongqing peaked at above 38 degrees Celsius yesterday. In Sichuan's Guilin County, the mercury shot to as high as 42.6 degrees. Beijing sweltered as the temperature rose to 38.4 degrees in the afternoon. At least 3 people across the country have died in the heat wave, while dozens more remain in hospital. In Jiangsu's Ganzhou city, firefighters had to rescue a driver when his lorry keeled over. He reportedly lost control of his vehicle after suffering a heat stroke. In the city of Chizhou in Anhui, a tourist collapsed while hiking on the Guanyin mountain. Rescuers found he had low blood sugar and dehydration. And in Shanghai, medical staff conducting citywide COVID tests were drenched under layers of protective clothing. Helpers came up with creative ways, such as taping bottles of frozen water to their bodies. But when the protective gear was removed, it was clear just how hot and stuffy it was inside their suits. Authorities expect the record-breaking heat to continue into the weekend, before rains bring some relief. However, the weather will sizzle again during the latter part of next week. Wong, HKIBC.
Financial markets are bracing for a possible 1% rise in U.S. interest rates later this month as the Federal Reserve tries to reduce inflation from a new 4-decade high. This has forced Americans to dig even deeper into their pockets to pay for food, fuel, and housing.
I feel the inflation pain every day. Every day everything is going up and up. More than inflation, they're price adjusting because even if inflation doesn't happen, they've raised the prices.
U.S. inflation rose to 9.1% last month, with sharp increases in the price of groceries and petrol. To make matters worse, hourly wages fell 1% in June. For the past year, salaries dropped 3.6%, adding pressure on the central bank and the Biden administration ahead of the midterm elections in November. Hong Kong's stock market closed lower for the 4th straight session, dragged down by financial and mainland property firms. Investors were nervous that developments in the mainland property market will weigh on China's financial system. This comes as many homebuyers refuse to pay mortgages on uncompleted projects. Financial stocks were among the hardest hit, with Ping An Insurance losing 5.4%. Property stocks also headed south. Long-for property dropped nearly 5%, and China Resources lent 3.3%. Tech firms bucked the trend following Apple's trial production of its new iPhone 14. Kao gained 7.7%. Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index closed down 46 points. Top 10 active stocks: Tencent down 40 cents, Tracafund down 10 cents, and BYD Company up $14.80. Ping An down $2.75, JD.com up $6.40, and CCB down 7 cents. Forex trading against Hong Kong dollar, euro at 7.85, British pound at 9.29, and Australian dollar 5.27. Over to the UK market, FTSE 100 is down 80 points. In the United States, a black bear has found that sharing a pool with koi carp is not a good idea. The intense summer heat prompted the beast to lumber into a garden fish pond to cool off. At first, the koi carp, which inhabit the pool in the Massachusetts town of Pepperell, were alarmed. But as the intruder made itself at home, the fish decided that enough was enough. The unwanted visitor barely had time to relax when the carp began darting around it. Bothered and bewildered, the animal gave up in frustration and wandered off to get some peace elsewhere. On to the weather now. There will be sunny intervals and a few showers tomorrow. Temperatures range between 28 and 32 degrees. Very hot with 1 or 2 showers in the next couple of days. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Thursday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Sarah Wong. Thanks for watching. Good night.